we can probably get started. Because they said they're going to kick us out at 3. Prova. Prova. Mi sentite? Si sente in fondo? No. Puoi attivare il microfono? Prova. Perfetto. Allora, cominciamo tra pochi secondi. Penso che siamo pronti. Ok, benvenuti a tutti. Questo panel avrà luogo in inglese, anche se Jim ha cominciato già a conoscere un po' di paroline in italiano, giusto? Gli ho spiegato ieri la differenza tra mezz'ora e mezz'oretta, perché mi ha detto ci vediamo prima del panel, 30 minutes before the panel. I said no, mezz'oretta, and he loved it, so he's in full Italianization mode. I just wanted to say thank you to the organizers of the festival and thank you to Perugia, a city of probably one of the highest levels of open-mindedness and tolerance in the whole Italy, as my colleague Alessia, who's there, was saying. It's been the first university for foreigners that has been created in Perugia. So this open-mindedness is certainly, where we would like to get started, because at the end of the day, journalism, that's all what journalism is about. But this panel today is about the living room opportunity and how the over-the-top consumption can be an opportunity for video journalism to take. So I'm very honored today to be here with Jim Louderback, who's a friend and an advisor to the company I have created, Watchup. I'm going to tell you more about me and my background in a second, but I would like to start with Jim so that he can start by introducing himself and his story and how he really got here to where he is, not in beautiful Perugia, but talking about living room and talking about over-the-top consumption in digital video, because he has a lot to tell you about. And guess what? It started with, a lot of journalism.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm going to try and talk somewhat slowly. I usually talk really fast, so if I start talking too fast, just let me know. I kind of fell into journalism. I didn't go to journalism school. I got a math degree and ended up getting a business master's degree and was building computer systems in New York City for a couple of years. And I started writing about what I was building, the databases and the systems. And I answered an advertisement in the New York Times to run the test lab, the computer test lab for this company, Ziff Davis. It was for a magazine, PC Week. There's a PC Week Italia. And I never thought I'd get the job, but they gave it to me. So suddenly I went from this geek to who was building computer systems, if we put that up, to running PC Week and then running PC Magazine. And editor-in-chief eventually, learning what journalism was all about. I was lucky. I worked for some very good journalists who taught me everything I needed to know. But as part of that, Ziff Davis, that company, went from magazines to the internet. I started an online news service called ZDNet. But eventually, we started a cable television network. We started a TV network called Tech TV. It was ZDTV first, and then Tech TV. And when we started that, we hired a bunch of really smart television people who knew how to make great TV, but they also needed people who who were geeks and knew how to talk about computers and technology. And so this is how I learned television. And I was plopped down in this television network with people from MTV and other cable networks to be the content geek. And then, so we were bought by one of the co-founders of Microsoft, Paul Allen. He and Bill Gates started Microsoft. And Paul decided that he wanted 10 hours a day live news about technology. This was in 2000 during the bubble. And we were in Silicon Valley in San Francisco and where everything was going on. And so he wanted 10 hours of live TV. And they said to me, do you want to run it? I knew nothing about television news, except what I'd learned a little bit there. But of course I said yes. And so I hired 150 people. We built a real television infrastructure for doing 10 hours a day of live TV.
What year was that?
This was 1999, 2000. 2001, the internet bubble burst. And I laid off all 150 people that I hired. But that was the way it went. From there, I went back doing web and magazines until some people that I worked with and I decided that we wanted to start a TV network again. Except this time, it was an online video television network, and it was called Revision 3. And we were focused on video about technology. It was done with, if you know the news site Dig, we were sister companies with Dig, so we had a great show called Dig Nation. We had tons of shows, so we ended up doing a lot of news, a lot of tech, a lot of video games, all video, all on the internet. Eventually, we started out in podcasting, ended up on YouTube. We were one of the biggest YouTube networks out there. And I sold the company to Discovery Channel, TLC, Honey Boo Boo, all that. And ended up for a couple years running online networks for Discovery. Bought probably the biggest native news organization on YouTube, Phil DeFranco and SourceFed. Rolled them into what we were doing. Started doing a lot more on Facebook and Twitter and all the social networks with our video. And about a year plus ago, I left Discovery. It had been about 2.5 years. I'd had enough of big companies again. And started working with a couple of other very interesting firms, including Adriano with Watchup, the online video creation service Watch It. So I've been helping Garrett Goodman. He's actually in this room after this with you, doing a panel. And working at an online video conference, running all of the industry content at something called VidCon. So VidCon is the biggest online video conference, I think, maybe in the world, but it's in Anaheim, California, where Disneyland is, in June, so June 23rd, 24th, 25th. And it'll be great. So that's kind of how I got here. So a weird combination of I'm a programmer and a geek. I was an editor-in-chief of a big magazine. I started a 10-hour live news operation when it was television, so moved to the web, did YouTube, and here I am. So how about you? Tell me about your background. Like, how'd you get here?
All right. Thank you so much, Jim. By the way, feel free to jump in and ask questions at any time. So my name is Adriano Farano. I come from a small town called the Cava di Tirreni, south from here, way south, where, of course, the coffee is better than in Perugia. And yeah, so I started as a journalist. It's funny because I was just hanging out with the first person who offered me an internship, but it was not in Italy. In Italy, I tried to get an internship in journalism, and I realized quite quickly that if I wasn't the son or a cousin or a relative or a friend of the publisher or the editor-in-chief, it was not that easy. So I migrated to France quite quickly, and the first internship I did was at the Courrier International in Paris, and then Le Figaro, and I loved France to the point that it's in France where I started my first non-profit startup called cafebabel.com, which is a pan-European magazine. We were doing some video, but not too much. It's still up and running after 15 years, with the idea of creating a pan-European conversation. After Cafe Babel, I decided to move to Silicon Valley, and that was for the program that I would recommend to everybody, absolutely everybody who's in journalism.
Here, tell me, I'll look it up.
And maybe we can put it up, the Knight Fellowship at Stanford, JSK Fellowship. So that program, the reason why it's so amazing is because it lets you spend a year in Silicon Valley. You can take all the classes you want at Stanford University. You are paid by Stanford to take classes and to start projects with the idea of reinventing journalism. Can we put it up? Okay.
There we go.
So here it is. And it's very much inspired by what the design school at Stanford, the D school, calls design thinking, which is something that at Watchup we do a lot. And it's actually something that journalists know how to do very well. It's all about talking to users, talking to people. It's very user-centric, and with our Italian humanities background, we could argue that in fact it's nothing new, and it all started with Socrates and the idea of putting the man at the center of everything we do. And that's, I think, the most untold secret of behind the success of Silicon Valley. It's that humanism. It's the fact of using technology as a leverage to augment and improve human experiences around consumption, but also knowledge. And that's always been something that I've been fascinated with. After the GSK fellowship, I joined Startex, the Stanford Startup Accelerator. The reason why it's so interesting, Startex, is because it's really a place where Stanford students, faculty, researchers can go and start a company, like an accelerator, and find investors, the community, all for free, because it's a non-profit. So you don't have to give away your equity to investors. While I was doing that, I got the idea for Watchup. And Watchup, it's really the first streaming service entirely designed for watching news. So think of it as a sort of Netflix, but for news, except that it's free. And the way it works is that you select the type of content you're interested in, and then we create for you a personalized newscast. It's all about reinventing the notion of newscast, telegiornale, un telegiornale personalizzato. That was the initial idea, and that's still what we are building.
Use that mouse here.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
So those are some of the partners we have. We work with CNN, with Fox News, with CNET. We are also in a bunch of local areas. As you know, in the US, because it's a big country, local TV stations are still very much relevant for a lot of people, to the point that 75% of Americans, and we are getting into the subject of today's debate, 75% of Americans watch local news on a regular basis. Now, how do they watch them? Historically, it's been with cable news. And that's where I would like to give the floor again to Jim to introduce a little bit the notions of, and the concepts and the definitions of what we are talking about. What is over the top? I heard even in Italy, people are talking increasingly about that. And I'm going to get back to what we do at Watchup and a bunch of different things I wanted to share with you and thoughts. But I would like to start with Jim, who knows this very well.
So, yeah, when we talk about over the top in the US, probably 90% of the households in the US subscribe to cable or satellite to get television. Our local channels will broadcast out, much like in Europe, but it's not very good. People don't pick it up that way. The infrastructure is set up where we either have cable wires that run around into people's houses, or we get stuff on satellite. And typically, there is what's called a cable box, which is a box that looks like this. This cable box connected up to the television. And before we had flat screens, our televisions were bigger in dimension, and the box sat on top of our televisions. And so that was the set-top box connected up to the TV. But the videos were delivered via a cable or via satellite. And what happened as we started to connect the internet up in our houses is we started to deliver video via the internet, via IP. And that came in to another box. So you had the cable or satellite box, and then you started to get a box, say, from Roku, or from Apple TV, or now Amazon Fire TV, or other boxes. And the reason why we call it over the top, and it's kind of silly, but it's because it goes over the top of the cable box. Because usually you'd put those little boxes on top of the cable box. So you were going on top of the traditional video infrastructure. So when we say OTT, or over the top in the US, what we mean is video programming delivered via the internet infrastructure rather than the traditional television infrastructure, which is the cable or the satellite dish. Does that make sense?
No, that's very useful. Is it clear? Yeah. So by the way, it's funny because when I got yesterday and I had to get my badge, I arrived, and although I've been living outside of Italy for 15 years, I'm still very much a purist of Italian language. So I introduced myself and said, salve, sono un oratore. And because I knew I had to get a speaker badge. And the person looked at me, cosa? Because apparently the word oratore it's not very used anymore, so I should say in Italian, sono uno speaker. So I said sono uno speaker, and if you look at our panel, it's the only one, so I got one of those in Italian, because I like my language, but our panel is the only one that hasn't been translated. So look, you have newsroom creative, nuove idee per il giornalismo, la crisi dei rifugiati, and ours is the living room opportunity, video news consumption in the over-the-top age. Why? Because it's, the concept of living room, it's, of course you can traduce it by salotto, but this idea of over-the-top, it's not very easy to translate.
You know what's also interesting about over-the-top now? Over-the-top started when we'd have the cable box and then another box on top. But now as people buy TVs, smart TVs, that are essentially computers inside of televisions, these boxes are going away. Well, we still have Apple TV, but there are new services that are going directly to the TV that are built in as smart TV systems from Zumo, and even Roku is being built into some TVs. So we'll say over the top in many ways, but it's not really over the top anymore.
Yeah. And so I'm going to ask Jim in just a minute about how can journalism take advantage of this big change, because that's really what we're talking about here, is a real revolution in the way content is being distributed. And of course, among all the different types of content, there is journalism. Traditionally, on the TV, it's been via cable, but it's changing, it's becoming more and more digital. But before we do that, I would love to show you guys what we have done in the space recently with Watchup. And it's...
And by the way, before you do that, so you know, Watchup is an over-the-top news delivery service. You can get it, you can get it on mobile, but you can also get it on an Xbox and a Nintendo and Apple TV and Fire. So it is really an over-the-top service.
Totally. Okay, so this is what we've done on Apple TV.
Can you imagine the future of TV news?
Had to create a compelling model for the average beginner.
Personalized to your interests.
What do you tell investors?
I tell people what I'm doing.
Rich points of view with the best channels.
He couldn't have been happy about the fact that the Supreme Court is going to bring this front and center.
And your local news.
Now UberX, which as we learned this morning...
It's now all in one app. Watchup, now on Apple TV.
So we couldn't be prouder of this app. We built it very quickly in about 2 months, and as soon as it launched, it got picked by Apple as one of the best apps, and it's still selected, still featured as one of the best apps. So we're talking about the biggest market for over-the-top distribution, in the world, the US, where there is still a huge market for cable and pay TV. I was looking at the numbers the other day. There are a little bit short of 100 million pay TV subscribers in the US still today. So about 98 million households who pay every month around an average of $92, if I'm not mistaken. So $92 to pay for content. Now, what is this content? It's a lot of live sports. It's still probably one of the main reasons for which people still pay that amount. Of course, there's entertainment, and there is news, especially local news. So the question, of course, has started to be, asked by a lot of people. So why should I keep paying for, that much money? If there are so many other options that can come to me over the top, right?
Right. Yep. Well, and the way that the financials work in the United States, and there, like I said, there are 98 million households that subscribe. There are probably about 105 million households in the U.S. So you can see it's a huge percentage. But because it's all when you buy one of these cable packages, you have 500 or 200 channels bundled together. But on average, everybody only watches about 10 or 11. So there's a little bit of an issue of I'm paying for the stuff that I don't want. Now these options are coming in, as we said, over the top. And it's not just getting CNN over the top. There are new options like what you're building. But what I find really interesting is whether it's Watchup or it's some other news services, it's not just the big providers. It's not just CNN and Fox News and NBC News. It's people who are just doing news on their own. So the internet companies that we bought, SourceFed, for example, where they're doing real news that's designed to appeal to people in their teens and 20s, that's a great news service and gives you great analysis and insight. It's not coming from one of the major companies, but it allows you to deliver that in a way that sits alongside some of the more traditional news services.
Totally. And so Italy has seen, I think a year from now, the launch of Netflix here. And Italy has been one of the first countries internationally beyond the English-speaking world where Netflix has launched. So we are, even here, I think at the beginning of a complete change in the way people consume video, that, by the way, has been also anticipated a lot with the switch to digitale terrestre, so the digital
DVD,
distribution of television.
Well, and Netflix was, in the U.S., our first over-the-top service that really made it big. HBO is also doing it with HBO now, and some others. But so it comes back to in the U.S. and even with DVB here, all television is delivered digitally. It's all a series of ones and zeros. It's all I'm taking a video and I'm encoding it and I'm sticking it out over cable, over DVB, over satellite, or over an internet connection. And then it all gets to a screen and then it gets converted into something that works for our eyes. So it goes from video to ones and zeros to video again.
That said, can you tell those guys the story of Netflix? Because it didn't start it.
Oh yeah, so Netflix in the US, I wish I had it. So it started as a way to get DVDs. Remember DVDs? We all remember those that around. They were CDs and then DVDs. And we in the US, I'm not sure if this is around the world, but in the US we had movie stores. It started out with VHS tapes. Blockbuster, right, exactly. And you would go there and you'd pick out the movie you wanted to watch, you'd bring it home for 3 days and bring it back. And then Netflix came out and they said, don't go to the video store, just go online and say, I want to watch Up and I want to watch this and that movie. And then they'd send it to you, and the next day in the mail, in a little red envelope, you'd get a disc.
Was it already unlimited?
No, it was 3. You can only have 3 out at a time. So the base package lets you have any 3 movies out at a time. I think you could have a more expensive package, you could have 5. So, but you could, in a month, you get a video, watch, send it back and forth, and the mail would take a day because they would have distribution centers around the country. So Netflix started as a way to deliver physical movies to your home.
And then something happened, and that's,
That's the internet.
Right.
Well, and what happened,
the innovator dilemma, right?
So when we started Tech TV, ZDTV in 1998, we did something revolutionary. Went to a company called US Robotics, and we got 50,000 digital cameras that plugged into your computer, net cams. And we gave these webcams, net cams, to our audience. And we were the first ones to put the audience on television. So we would do a show and we would find somebody in a little town sitting next to a farm with 500 cows, and they would be talking with us about technology. And the images looked terrible, right? It was, you know, for those of you who know the tech, it was a 320 by 200. It was tiny and it was 15 frames a second, but it was amazing because we could do it. But as the internet got faster, and the interesting thing about bandwidth, all right, so as bandwidth got better, as we went from a modem, 56K, remember that, to the early, in the US it was DSL, but things delivered over TV, over very slow internet connections. Then we got what's called cable modems, so suddenly we were at 500 megabits or a gigabit, or maybe, a megabit, maybe 2 megabits. Once we got up to about 5 or 6 megabits to the home, suddenly you could deliver an HD stream in a really good-looking way. And so for Netflix, that was kind of the tipping point when, you know, a quarter or half of the US had internet of 2 megabits or 3 megabits. Suddenly they didn't have to send the DVD to you. They could stream it to you over the internet. And so I think this is, when I think about the way media has evolved, and the way the internet has transformed media, it's a story of how bandwidth has transformed connections. So in the early days of dial-up, what was the first media to be disrupted? It was magazines and newspapers, because it was very easy for text to be delivered over a dial-up connection, very slow. And then photos, and then music. 99, 2000, Napster totally changed music and destroyed the music industry because you could deliver music via the internet. First as a download, and then as a stream. And the same thing started happening with video. When we launched Revision 3 in 2006, most people downloaded what we did. They didn't stream it because the internet wasn't fast enough. That's why we went on iTunes. But then when you could stream in a good enough way, we saw the rise of YouTube, and we saw the rise of Netflix, and we saw the rise of these ability to deliver video in a streamed way. Well, now we're reaching the point where we've disrupted every existing media, and but internet bandwidth continues. There's gigabit now. I don't know where gigabit is in Italy and other parts of the US, but Google is putting gigabit into people's houses. I have a house in the mountains in the middle of nowhere. Like, imagine going 20 miles that way into the mountains, 30 acres of land. I have gigabit fiber going to that house. It's the fastest internet in the country. And now there are new media being developed and new ways of delivering content via these digital, and so we're not disrupting our old media anymore, although we still are. Now we're creating new media, which is really interesting too. And you know, if you cycle back to news in the living room,
Right, news, yeah.
you get the fastest internet over that connection in your living room, right? Because it's a hardwired. You can walk around with these, and you get decent internet with this. But the connections that go to your phones are still only about, you know, they're where we were 5 or 6 years ago, or maybe 8 years ago, wireless technology versus wired. So what you get here isn't enough to give you a high bandwidth experience, a real HD in a big screen environment, or even some of the others. But what we're starting to get to at home is lots of bandwidth, beautiful images, and now we can pull these things together in different ways. And to me, that's what you're at the forefront of doing, and some other people, in delivering these great, rich news experiences over the top to the best screen in the house in a way that is very, very captivating and enthralling and interesting, and that organizes it in ways where it's not that somebody at NBC or CNN or CNN telling you what you want and what you think is important.
Yeah.
They let you do it themselves.
That's key. That's
Right?
key. Yeah, totally. And I think that, you know, in media there's always a good way of framing our observation of how the media landscape changes. It's to focus again on what the human experience is. And the human experience, you can basically think of it from 2 points of view, you know, if we want to simplify. One is the push, the other one is the pull. So push is when, you know, I turn the TV on, and what is it is being pushed to me? Mm-hmm. It's very effortless. It's a lean back experience. It's probably more relaxing. Doesn't need me to be very much proactive. Another one is the pull. And the pull means that, you know, I am the one who decides what I want to do. The problem, so to speak, is that I need to put thinking into it. So I don't know if you guys subscribe to Netflix, but for instance, in, you know, my household, we spend a lot of time arguing about what we should watch. It's not the classic TV set where you turn it on, there's something. So you don't even have to think. And so when we started prototyping Watchup and applying that design thinking, we started talking to a lot of people. And we realized that people still love that effortless experience. And second insight was that for news, sometimes, you could argue most of the times, you don't really know what you want to watch. You just want to be informed. You want to, you need to know what's going on in the world. You don't have a clue about, I want to watch that story about Ted Cruz or this or that. And so we started thinking, okay. But then on the other side of the spectrum, the traditional live TV model is broken because when you turn it on, as Jim was saying, you are having a story that has been, you're getting one point of view from one channel. And so we came up with this idea of Watchup saying, okay, what if we can combine the best of both worlds? What if we can have a VOD-based service where it's not live, so it's not like a random thing that some editor-in-chief in Atlanta or New York has decided for you.
By the way, you know what VOD is, right? Video on demand? Just want to make sure.
Yeah, video on demand. So content that is not live, so like short form, but then we have a smart algorithm that it's going to pick the different videos that we're going to give you, and those videos are going to play one after the other. So that at the end, you get the density of the VOD experience that live doesn't have, but you also have the effortless experience of a lean-back type of setting.
Well, and the thing that's interesting about that is I live in San Francisco in the Bay Area, but I grew up on the east coast of the US in a town called Boston. And I like to know what's going on there. So I still subscribe to the local newspaper in Boston. But I also can go in and say, look, I want to know what's going on in Boston in my newscast, even though I'm sitting in San Francisco, whereas if I watched the local TV, they would just tell me about San Francisco. And that's something, it allows me to pull the things that I want in that I want to know about.
Yeah, and by the way, it would be, possiamo far vedere un attimo lo schermo? So I apologize for the quality of the image, but you can see that when we started with Watchup, we had
Keep going, I'm going to fix it.
We had a strong focus on the iPad, and then we launched on iPhone and on smartphone. But since a little over a year, nice dog. Since a little over a year, what we did was to start building for Fire TV, which is the Amazon set-top box, and then we did Xbox 360, which is the gaming console of Microsoft, as you guys know, and then Wii U from Nintendo. So very interesting gaming consoles that people are using to watch videos. And when we talk to those companies, they tell us that most of the time spent by a gamer on the gaming console is spent to watch video. So it's a set-top box that it's a gaming console that is transformed into a set-top box. It's so interesting. And the latest one we've done is Apple TV. So as you can see, over the time, we started with 0%, and now over half of our traffic comes from the big screen. Isn't that amazing? So we are really, literally pushing the boundaries of what digital distribution is, starting with mobile, but now it's mainly TV.
I want to push the boundaries a little bit further, all right? I want to talk about, so one of the things I think is really interesting about when we talk about the future of over-the-top in the living room and news in that environment and what that means, and think about the bandwidth, and we're now able to deliver an amazing video stream via the internet, via over-the-top, via Watchup and others, to people's big screen TVs, and it's a great experience. But like I said, with bandwidth, we haven't stopped there. And so the next media that we're developing, the first media that we're really developing that is unique to the digital age is virtual reality. And VR is a way to go, and if you think about what we try and do as journalists, is we want to take you to the story. We want to have you experience the story as well and as richly as you can so that you really understand it. And virtual reality allows us to tell stories in brand new ways. And Sure, you can take, a Google Cardboard and put it on here and have a not great experience, but as you start to see more of these virtual reality devices come out that give you as good a high bandwidth experience as your big screen TV at home, whether it's Oculus Rift or the HTC Vive or upcoming PlayStation VR, you're going to be able to tell, and you can now tell stories in ways that you can't do at all anymore. And to experience these, you need a living room. You need a big room where you can move around. The HTC Vive, which is one of the new headsets, requires like 12 foot by 12 foot to actually work. It just came out this week and it's amazing. I want to show you something.
Yeah.
Because I think it's one of the most interesting pieces of news storytelling out there. I'll tell you a story about it a little bit. Where am I? Yeah, here we are. So this is something called Clouds over Sidra, and I'm not sure if you guys have heard of this. But essentially, and I'm just going to show you a relatively 2D version of what is a 3D experience. If you have any VR at all, if you've got if you've got a cardboard, if you've got Samsung stuff, if you've got one of the higher ends, go watch this because it will take you somewhere that you cannot go and do it in a way that will just blow your mind and cause you to cry. It's the story of a refugee camp in Sidra, and it's told by a little girl's point of view. It tells her story. And it was done by Chris Melk, but a guy who used to work for me, Barry Pausman, who now has Variable Labs, with the UN. And when they released this, it was so moving via the UN and UNICEF that they doubled donations to UNICEF just because of this one piece. And this is a little bit of what it looks like.
Crossing the desert into Jordan. The week we left, my kite got stuck in a tree in our yard. I wonder if it is still there. I want it back. My name is Sidra. I am 12 years old. I am in the 5th grade. I am from Syria in the Dar'a province in Khil City. I have lived here in the Zaatari camp in Jordan for the last year and a half. I have a big family, 3 brothers. One is a baby. He cries a lot. I asked my father if I cried when I was a baby, and he says I did not. I think I was a stronger baby than my brother. We like to keep our bags and books clean and without rips. It is like a game to see who has the nicest books with no folds in the pages.
So I'm going to pause it here because I encourage you all to get this and watch it, whether it's in a 2D experience or a 3D experience. But this is an example of an amazing piece of journalism and a story that can only be told in this virtual reality environment. When you have a headset on and you're experiencing it, it takes you there in a way that nothing has been able to do before. And when you do that in a big screen experience with one of the new headsets that really only work in the living room, this is kind of the future of whatever you want to call it, over-the-top VR, but it's a way to tell stories in a magnificent way that as we learn more and more about how to do it, we're going to bring our audiences more and more into the stories that we've wanted to tell our whole lives. This team right now is doing the similar thing for the UN in Gaza, and just amazing. Anyway, I can't say enough about it, but that's an example of the future of news and over-the-top and living room video that you just cannot do. And you think about that's where you're going to go.
Before we turn it to the audience, I would love any questions or feedback. An interesting thought on that is on the business model, right? So this is something, from what I understand, it was financed by
It's financed by the UN, yes.
Right? So what do you think the model for VR is going to be in the future? Do you foresee like a Netflix-like all-you-can-eat model, or is it going to be ad-supported?
It's a really good question.
Sponsored content.
So right now there are a couple of services where you can actually go at, like YouTube for VR, although YouTube has VR, Little Star and Viridio, so that'll allow you to look at this stuff. And there will be ads in this environment. We actually see a lot of brands, a lot of companies doing VR experiences. So car manufacturers, the Volvo and General Motors and liquor companies and And a lot of people like L'Oreal is exploring VR as a way to tell stories about makeup. I think you're also going to see, if you think about a VR experience like this, you will see brands underwriting it and being part of it. Maybe not this story, but you might see a brand in the background here. You may have breaks. There will be paid experiences like Netflix where you want to do this. So, but it's all up in the air. There's one company that I've been talking to called Retinad, R-E-T-I-N-A-D. They started out thinking that they were going to be an ad network for VR. Like, oh, we're going to serve ads and all this VR. They came up with metrics and ways to track where people are looking and heat maps in VR, because where your attention goes is really important. But they did these analytics as a giveaway for people who were part of their ad network. And people started using the analytics rather than the ad network. Well, now they're an analytics company, and they're doing stuff around analytics and the ad networks down the road. By the way, I want to mention one thing about what they do. So, you know, we're all used to our ratings, and we're all used to how many views did we get, and how long did people watch, and when did they drop off, and what's our rating. And when you watch stuff in VR, there's so many more things you can measure. First of all, you can measure a heat map of where people are looking. But this company, Retinad, has neuroscientists on staff, and they realize that when you have a headset on, the way you move your head is different whether you're frightened, disgusted, angry, laughing. All these emotions cause different head movements that they track. So you can get a heat map and an emotion track. And you can see that when somebody was looking around and all of a sudden they saw that and they're like, oh my God, it's a guy with I don't know what it is, but that you can track the emotion in the heat map. Imagine being able to, as a journalist, see not only where people are looking, but what emotion you incented when they were experiencing that portion of the story. And you could then learn from that and do a better job next time. I'm amazed by that potential.
That's awesome. So again, if you guys want to jump in, raise your hand, please.
Do we have a microphone? Right here in the front.
Please say your name and the organization you're affiliated with.
My name is Antonio Pavolini, and this is a question related to my previous job when I was a media analyst. Now I'm back as a corporate communicator now. Much easier. I just installed, when you were talking about it, Watchup, and I found it amazing.
Thank you.
I come from your maybe direct competitor, that is Haystack.
Haystack, okay.
And the reason why I installed Haystack first was that it was on the Chromecast App Store. My set-top box, the way I watch Haystack on my flat screen is the Chromecast. Now I see that your product is much better and has much wider partnerships around the globe compared to Haystack. Haystack can be useful to me just to watch the primaries in the US, full stop, and nothing more. You have partnerships with many media organizations in Italy, Europe, wherever. The question is this maybe telling us that a more controlled environment like Apple TV, Fire, Amazon, and Roku, and so forth, they have app stores where they decide who jumps in, and those who don't jump in. So it's a way to reassure media organizations that their previous business won't be cannibalized. Is maybe this the reason why you're able to put together many more partnerships with media organizations compared to a little bit scaring world that is the Google environment, the Google ecosystem?
It's a good question. First of all, we just to be totally transparent and to help you guys understand where we are, most of the channels you actually see in Italy, unfortunately, aren't direct partners of us. We have someone here, Alessia, if you can raise your hand, who's our country manager for Italy and much more, who selects the best channels she can find on the web and aggregate them. In the US, though, we do have direct partnerships with 80% of the channels that we stream. So just as an aside. What is easy for us, I would say easier than for Apple or Google, is the fact that unlike them, we are a startup company, so we can move much quicker, and we can also be more flexible with the way we give them something back. We share way more data and insights about how users consume the content. And those data are super important for organizations like Fox News, CNN, but also all the local stations that are on the platform, in order for them to understand which type of users consume their product on our platform, their content on our product. That's where the lines are a little bit blurred, and especially on which platforms. You were mentioning Chromecast. I'm happy to say that we're going to be on Chromecast.
I was going to ask you, why aren't you on Chromecast?
Very soon. Well,
soon. So you're pre-announcing like next month?
We are pre-announcing sooner.
Okay.
Sooner.
So next week.
Probably. But it's extremely important for them to understand where their content is being consumed, and how, and on which platform, which type of screen. Because, as Jim was saying, this is the future. We all know that, after the music industry, the movie industry, the news industry is going to be the next to be disrupted.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that these over-the-top boxes and services, in most cases, don't limit what goes up on there. So I actually, if you go up to the screen, I put the Roku developer page up here. When I was at Revision 3 and we were building out the online video network, we were actually the first independent channel on Roku after Netflix. Oh yeah, did you put up the screen? Anyway, so we were the first ones on Netflix. Nobody had ever heard of us except if you were a geek and happened to like what we were doing. But we sat next to Netflix and we sat next to Pandora. And now all these other channels have come on and we ended up doing Chromecast and all these. But there really aren't there aren't a lot of limitations to doing something on Roku. Now, Apple TV has had limitations. It's a big deal to get on Apple TV. Chromecast doesn't have a lot of limitations. The Xbox has a lot of limitations. The PlayStation has a lot of limitations. So many of these devices have a lot of limitations. Many others don't. But I don't think that drives forward a lot of what you guys do. It's more, where's the audience and how are we going to get the best bang for the buck? And also, I think, for us, when we did Roku for Revision 3, no one else was there, and we got a lot of attention for it. I mean, you did the same thing with Nintendo. There aren't a lot of people on the Nintendo Wii U platform. When you went up there, it was a great boost because there wasn't much else there. So you got to go, A, where the viewers are, but you also have to go where a lot of your competitors aren't. So you get both of those. Do we have another question?
Any more questions? No, okay. So, building on what Jim was saying, so Roku was clearly the pioneer, if I can say that, as a set-top box. Then we observed Amazon doing a big push into the space with Fire TV. Fire TV is actually the platform where Watchup is the most successful. Apple TV launched 2012, I think. But it started as a curated... No.
Apple TV was out before that.
Before that?
Yeah, I think it was in 2008 or 2009. I have the original Apple TV.
All right.
Yeah, I hacked it because it didn't do much. But yeah,
it didn't do much.
It's finally something that's good.
But Apple has been quite late to the game of over-the-top, because on Apple TV, up until a few months ago, you could only watch a certain number of apps. It was very much of a closed environment. Right now, with the 4th generation of Apple TV, any developer can build an app for this. It's very much like iOS. So now, of course, as the number of apps increases, the question becomes discovery, right? Back to the idea of this being seen as an opportunity for journalism. Well, journalism is competing already with other types of content. And so when you think about the competition that comes, here from places like Facebook, of course, and Google, etc., in the living room, it's even fiercer, I should say, because when somebody enters the living room and sits on the couch, you as a journalism organization, you are competing with other services for the attention of that person. Is that person going to, be willing to be entertained, or does that person want to be informed? Either way, for us as people in the journalism world, we have to make sure that the experience in the living room is designed for that type of more lean back approach. Nobody wants to sit on the couch and read a text article. Nobody wants to sit on the couch and spend a lot of time finding the right type of video content that he or she wants to consume. Chances are that those people are going to be much more willing to have a type of information and experience that can come to them, so that it's a designed experience for a lean back mode.
Right, and by the way, this is one of the reasons why Facebook and video on Facebook has been huge, and it's a great experience. And we all love to sit on mobile and go through our news feed, and when we see something cool, we stop and we watch it for 10 seconds, and then we move on. Facebook has tried to build a more curated experience of video where you watch a video and then you watch another one and another one and another one, and it's not really working that well because the context of the viewing on this device is different than the context of viewing on a big screen. And it's very important that when we develop viewing experiences, we understand the context of the viewer. And when we do news in particular, when you develop for Facebook, you want to develop something, and this is, for example, what Watchup, the company that I do a bunch of work for, does a great job in helping to create videos that work on Facebook because they're short and they grab you and they have text and there's no voice overlay. Where instead, when you develop for the television experience, it's more of a, I want to just start and just give me what I want. I don't want to interact as much in that way. And so I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah, and that's when I think, the question becomes, how do you create that lean back experience? Is it via editorial curation? Is it a machine learning algorithm that is going to power that experience? Is it via social discovery? I think those are really the three elements that can frame and direct an experience into a certain direction.
Yeah, and in some ways those experiences are changing as well as technology allows us to do things like add on a big screen TV experience text overlays that you can interact with and move with. And the jury's out as to whether that's actually going to be something that becomes more of a thing or not. I was just listening to this yesterday. I'm going to pull up the person who was talking about it. I can't read this. Oh, yes, I can. Claire McHugh from Accionista was talking about her company that allows you to actually add text on a TV screen and pull it in and out and do great things with it. And so I thought that was fascinating as well. In a lean back environment, but still to be able to interact with some of the text.
Right. And so the question is, how those, how do you personalize the experience? What is the part between human curation, algorithms? How do you train those algorithms? We spend a lot of time at Watchup working with the best in class in this field. The company has been accelerated at Stanford University, so of course we have advisors from Stanford and try to really take advantage of that type of state-of-the-art innovation. We think this is the future. We need to find the right balance between those two elements.
Well, and if you take the future a little further out, to me it's all about the living room experience is going to change. And right now it's a big, great flat screen, but over time that living room experience will be more of a virtual reality experience, an augmented reality experience, a shared experience. We are developing new media, and this is just the first of so many new ones that will be developed and new ways to tell stories and be a journalist and really help get people to understand those stories that are important and move them in an emotional way. And I even think that the living room will be a very different place in 10 years. It might be more of rather than a room with a big screen TV, it might be a room where you have an entire bubble that's a 360 screen that you can walk into and experience and share with other people. We're still going to need journalists. We're still going to need to tell great stories. We're still going to need to be able to pull them together in a way that allows you to experience them either in a passive or an active way. But that, to me, is the future of over the top, because it's going to go not on the traditional television experience, but it's going to be delivered in new ways digitally, and it's going to enable new types of experiences, and that's what I get excited about.
That was a great final word. I think mine is going to be about the fact that I truly believe we are at the beginning, not in the middle, not at the end. We're really at the beginning of a huge transformation. And I think that journalists and the journalism world has everything, all the skills, all the knowledge, all the expertise to take advantage of this revolution, because as Jim was saying, it's all about telling a good story, to create the content, and to put that content into an experience, into a product that has been thought and designed around the individual. It's a humanly powered experience that has to be leaned back, has to be thought for that type of consumption. So thank you very much. Let me finish by saying selfishly that at Watchup, our startup, our video news aggregator, we are recruiting, hiring, of course, engineers a lot, but also an assisting country manager for Italy. So if there's somebody, youngsters or less young, who are interested, please contact me or Alessia, who's here, about that opportunity. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you to beautiful Perugia. Grazie.
Grazie. I would sit here and forget.